Me as a doctor, before I came to this house, it is really important to me, this topic. And I think there's a clear distinction when we're debating this topic to make sure we talk about mental well-being and mental health. Lockdown proved that everyone's mental well-being gets punished, but not everyone has a mental health issue. And that's really important when you're trying to segregate out services, because how do we supply the correct services to the people who need it the most? Now, I've spent my last 5 years in Parliament campaigning around body image, campaigning about a men's health minister, particularly with regards to the suicide side of things. But I want to turn my attention to something that's really close to my heart and really important, is the issue of adolescents' mental health, because I am deeply concerned by the increase we've seen of children who are suffering. But it's not just things like eating disorders. We're also seeing ADHD, we're seeing anxiety, we're seeing autism. And this is a pledge to a plea to the new minister to think radically and in a positive way when it comes to the NHS, because in my area of Leicestershire, 40% of CAMHS is dealt with dealing with ADHD and autism. That means that actually that takes a lot of pressure away from the kids who are self-harming, who have eating disorders or have significant serious depression or psychosis. I think there's a radical solution to pull out education and health and pull them together, to pool these services as specialisms. That would build on the work that the last Conservative government did about having representatives in school and mental health workers, and allow freedom for the GP and the CAMHS to concentrate on what they need to deal with. Of course.
On that point, could I also draw his attention to the role of care coordinators with adolescents and the problems and challenges of the transition to adult care? Because that moment can be critical in actually securing a pathway to an effective outcome, and often the confusion over where responsibilities are delimited and begin has really been a difficulty for my constituents.
He is absolutely spot on, and these cliff edges that exist in the NHS and education and social services cause a real problem, particularly for families, because at 18, suddenly you don't become not having a diagnosis at all. But the reason I think it's so important to pull these areas together, it allows us to stratify the way we use our resources, because it is limited, and we know health costs will continue to go up and continue to spiral. So I urge the Minister to have a think about potentially creating almost a national send service that would pull education and health experts together, releasing schools, relieving GPs, primary care and secondary care with the specialists. Because now that we have the setup of the ICBs, there is a scope to be able to do this regionally across the 42 areas. I think it's well worth thinking about pooling those resources together, because you get specialist help and identify early, as the member for Ashford said. Identifying people early means they won't end up in these crisis positions in the first place, which brings us back to preventative care in the first place. So we can identify those who are having problems with well-being and those who have problems with mental health issues. And for me, that's at the crux of what we need to do. How do we pool the resources in a way that's sustainable for the taxpayer, most importantly, sustainable for the service users and the service providers, the children, the adolescents and the staff who have to cope with some of the most difficult problems? So I leave that with the Minister. One of the biggest things we saw, most shocking things during the pandemic, was the increase in eating disorders. Yeah. Very difficult topic for any government to try and break down, even across the world. Would he ensure that this is looked at as a priority, because we know the impact that eating disorders live with people for the rest of their life and cause people to lose their life? Yeah. So would he make that an emphasis? There was a roundtable that happened previously. Would he look at doing a similar thing again to bring experts together?
Yeah. I mean, I'm very reluctant to commit ministers to roundtables when it's not my portfolio, but because they'll do the same when they're covering me in Westminster Hall debates. But I do say this to the honourable gentleman: look, this is something we take incredibly seriously, and when we were in opposition, we gave support to the then government on this agenda as well. And I want to assure him that we will do everything we can to support people who have eating disorders, and to make sure that we get the right provision and the right help and support at the right time to those people who need it.